wonderful good morning to you, Grenada, Carriacou, PD Martinique, the rest of the Eastern Caribbean. 6 minutes gone past the hour of 9 o'clock. Welcome to The Point for today, the first day, and I'm not fooling you, it is the first day of the month of April, and I kid you not about that. I would have possibly imagined we're 4 months on into the year 2022. I'm Joseph Cadore, and welcome to another edition of the program. Good morning again to those of you that's joined that's been with us all morning on Classic Radio. That's Classic 105.5 and 105.9 on the FM band. Welcome back to our viewers on television, Channel 7, Channel 11, and Channel 20. We also say good morning to those of you that's viewing us via the World Wide Web at www.gbn.gd and via our social media platforms, be Facebook and our YouTube channel. My guests this morning, representatives of civil society organizations, no stranger to the GBN. I don't think they're any stranger to anybody in Grenada, but I will assume reasonably let's assume that you don't know who they are. In studio with me, and of course, she's probably, I must say, you are the first lady, female, that I've had in the studio with me, I'm almost saying it wrong, that has joined me in person in the studio since the COVID pandemic. Welcome. You're breaking barriers.
Good morning, Joseph. Good morning to your listeners and viewers. And thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning.
And also on the conversation with us, but he's joining us via Zoom, Mr. Dave Nedd. Good morning, Dave. How are you?
Good morning to you, Joseph, and good morning to the listeners. Okay.
Indeed, it's a pleasure.
This opportunity that you have given us at the civil society to engage with the broader public.
Indeed, it's a pleasure having you. And it's just interesting the way we've now married the traditional way of doing these programs in studio and technology. Wow. And we talked about COVID, they're not being lessons, positive lessons to be learned. My dear sir and lady, we are, no arguments over this, we're into an election cycle.
We are.
And certainly when that period comes up, there's a lot of questions, and a lot of times there are a lot more questions and answers, questions relating things that we traditionally, Lady Fergusson, we take for granted. Registration process, who is eligibility to vote, and all of those sort of things. Normally we don't even bother with it. And then the question starts to arise, well, who's going to vote? What are those questions? But as a civil society organization, even before we get to some of the concerns that you've raised regarding those, a lot of many issues, share with us, though, your grouping. Exactly what are your core values? Who do you represent? So that persons can get an appreciation for where this conversation is coming from.
Okay, so again, thank you again, Joseph. And the grouping of civil society organizations is an informal grouping. And it's a good opportunity for me to say good morning to Ms. Judy Williams, the initial convener of the grouping back in 1999 to do the Code of Political Conduct. Of course, she's under the weather for some time now. And basically it was about making citizens more alert, right? And helping to participate their involvement in the process, right? And we had a code of political conduct as it relates to the conduct of the campaign. Good. And since after the 2013, which was a clean sweep for a second time, we thought there was the proposition that we should stay together as a sort of watchdog, right? And become more involved in the discussion, just not at election time, but in between elections, right? Basically, and we were involved in the constitution reform process, a lot of public sensitization and education. So the grouping is made up of organizations and also individuals, persons who have an interest on the governance, right? So that is basically it.
So we can safely say that you're not a Johnny-come-lately group that has just surfaced yesterday and trying to initiate change.
Well, not at all. I mean, we have been around since for the 1999 elections.
Great. And I wanted us to establish that, because very often when we become agitated of change, people start thinking, well, where did Sandra, Fergusson and Dave Nedd come out of the blues, because it's the election, and asking questions. Dave, how have you been? What has it been like to be part of this organization of change? as a watchdog organization, as Sandra put it?
It's one of the things that I look forward to doing. One of the functions of our civil society, one of the functions of every citizen of Grenada is to keep our governments accountable and in check. And from that perspective, I have thoroughly enjoyed the engagement. We are all concerned about the development of Grenada. We're all concerned about us taking care of this land, and we're concerned again about what we're going to hand over to the next generation. So from that perspective, it's all been good. It's all been good.
And I'm happy with that. I'm going to start a conversation with you, Sandra. As your role as watchdog of keepers of the gates for us as Grenadians, you have in recent times over the years, you've raised their concerns and issues that you've brought to the fore, that you've penned to the Parliamentary Electoral Office, raising legitimate concerns that represents the voice of the people.
Okay, so in 2020, very early in 2020, January 2020, the grouping was invited, along with representatives of all political parties, to a meeting by the Parliamentary Elections Office to be advised that there were going to be amendments to the RPA to accommodate replacement of voter ID cards because the cards had expired. Okay? At a press, so I think that meeting probably was about Tuesday, and at a press conference on Friday, the team from the elections office also made that announcement, okay, and they had indicated to us that it was on the advice of the Attorney General's office, and the meeting recommended to them that before you bring these amendments to be tabled in Parliament, could the office make a presentation and that we review and have us, offer our comments, before it is tabled. And we thought that there was an agreement as far as that was concerned. And then the next week, we got a letter which stated that that this was administrative. There was no need for amendments, and therefore the office was going to be proceeding, with the replacement. And then on top of that, we had COVID. Now, one of the other things that we understood, based on those two activities, the meeting with political parties and CSO and the press conference, was that there was a new service provider to the Parliamentary Elections Office called ASIT that we had never heard about. I don't know how many people were aware of it, who were these, what was the, by what method of procurement, etc. Because the issue of voter and voters registration, the integrity of the process, is essential, okay, to facilitate the fact that you would have had an election where you would feel confident, that you had been able to exercise your voter right in a free and fair, and therefore the issue of transparency.
Right.
So subsequently, well, of course, there were issues as it related to COVID, the shutdown, etc., etc. So we wrote a letter in 2020 because we had noticed some things on the website which was a bit unusual and, in fact, contrary to the representation of the People's Act. And that was, there was the MGov website, right, that was inviting people to register, okay? But not only was it inviting people to register, it invited people to upload documents. Now, the RPA, there have been no changes yet. The last time I looked, which was to make sure I was coming on this program and you know, talking, you know, there had been no amendments, and you are supposed to present yourself in person, right? And if you are a shut-in, the Parliamentary Elections Office goes to you, okay? So there it was, upload your documents, including your electronic signature, etc., etc., etc. And then there was another website, Infinity Inc.,
Right.
which is a CBI service provider, which is now inviting citizens, persons who have acquired their citizenship via, you know, passports, to register to vote, right? Well, among other things, you know that we have a residence requirement. And not only that, the CBI gives you, it exempts you from residence, it exempts you from language. You understand? All you had to do is send your money and get your passport. And here you are now, you know, being invited to register to vote, right? So a letter was penned to the supervisor of elections, indicating to him that these things were noticed. In fact, when we went on the Parliamentary Elections website, the PEO, which was described as their independent website, yes it is, there has been nothing on that website except 2019 announcing the appointment of the acting supervisor.
Right.
And in fact, we learned when we looked at the MGov a little closer, since 2019, November 2019, that's what's going on. So I will now invite Mr. Nedd to share with you what was the supervisor's response to these concerns. And then I would also like to wrap up by making some reference to what is called the multi-purpose identification card.
Before I get to you, Dave, I just want us, because we want to make sure that we be clear
Sure.
and that people appreciate the RPA, and that's governed and it gets its protection by from the Constitution.
Well, first of all, let us go back to the Office of Supervisor of Elections, which is a constitutional and independent office. And
Right.
nobody better than my colleague, Mr. Nedd, to talk about that.
Right, and so I want people to understand that this is not just a random activity and a random concern. This speaks directly to who we are, our democracy, to us as a people. And you just, right. So Dave, so let's talk. So we've highlighted what those concerns were. It was penned to the supervisor of elections. Did you receive? Was a response rendered? Your mic is off, Dave. You're muted.
Thank you, Joe. My apologies. So the supervisor of elections on July the 30th, 2020, responded to the concerns of civil society.
Which was penned in November
There
2020.
were 3 bullets. He acknowledged the letter, of course, and he responded saying that the comments were not intended for the grouping of civil society, that he had engaged with other entities, and it may have been one of the other entities. The second bullet spoke to the management of the Parliamentary Electoral Office, and that addressed the concerns directly that Sandra was speaking about with regard to those websites that were advertising the registration. And it's very interesting, his comments. He says, it must be advised that the Parliamentary Elections Office is not responsible for the content published through other media. And that is interesting. And let me repeat it. It must be advised that the Parliamentary Elections Office is not responsible for the content. And by the content, he's referring to those websites that were Sandra alluded to earlier. published through other media. And it brings us to the what Sandra was speaking about just a while ago. The supervisor of elections is a constitutional office. He, as the director of public prosecutions, the director of audit, they are as also the Public Service Commission. Those are independent entities that is subject to the control of no person or authority. So, and in section 35 of the Constitution, subsection 1, under supervisor of elections, it says here clearly, there shall be a supervisor of elections whose duty it shall be to exercise general supervision over the registration of voters in elections of the members of the House of Representatives and over the conduct of such elections.
Okay.
So everything to do with the registration process and everything to do with the conduct of the elections. And those are two separate entities. There's a registration process, and then there is the actual elections. But the supervisor of elections is directly, independently in control of all of those actions. So it is of concern to the grouping that he would have penned that report.
That response.
Because clearly, Sandra was saying something?
No, she was just saying the response. Yes. Go ahead.
Yes. So clearly, there is an entity outside of the independent office of the supervisor that is advertising a registration process. And if that is the case, then the supervisor has a duty as the overall person in charge to investigate, to find out what are these allegations.
So
to bring confidence to the Grenadian people.
So let me ask you both. So let's assume that there is a third party that's involved in the registration process. What does that mean? We talk about integrity. We talk about maintaining the sanctity of our civic rights and responsibility as a people, and those responsibilities that's enshrined and governed and by the role of the electoral office. So if in fact there's a third party, what does that speak to regarding our democracy?
So, and just let me come back here. So, and his second response, because let's say the point we want to raise is that they're not only encouraging you to register, that might be fine, but upload your documents. So then, who is processing those documents? What is happening to those documents that are being uploaded? Because secondly, the supervisor of elections in his letter referred to our allegations. Our allegations, right? We brought it to his attention with a link, okay? And one would have expected, right, that he would have gone and checked it out. But the fact that he says it's an allegation, suggesting that we want to, I don't know, bring into disrepute or making something that has not been proven, right? But we have given you the link. You go verify. Because your answer certainly underscores and has now confirmed our concern, right?
Right.
Because according to our law, registration is done by presenting yourself in person, and for the case of shut-ins, the parliamentary action goes to it. So for us, this is a serious matter because it puts in question the integrity of the process. And when you get an answer like that from an individual who has the authority, right? Constitutional authority and responsibility. You understand? You have to be very concerned. And how might what is happening to those persons who have uploaded documents and registered via online, and how is that going to affect elections, your election process?
Dave, you would certainly agree that this is a concern, is a concern for your organization and should be for the general populace.
Definitely so. Definitely so. The existence of the link indicates that there is some entity, and the supervisor have now confirmed that the entity is operating outside of the office of the electoral office.
When was the last?
There's another entity that is facilitating registration, and we have to understand that the registration process is what guarantees our democracy, the whole concept that one man, one vote, the whole concept of equality. That is what makes us equal. It is because your vote in matters that concern our development is equal to mine, and we are equal in that perspective. And if that process is being in any way challenged, then it is the supervisor, it is the responsibility of the person in charge to take the matter and to bring it where it has to go.
Subsequent to that response, that was the response you received. Were there follow-up communiques?
We responded. We took some time in our response as well. We made sure we checked out the sites again. You know, nothing had changed. And we sent an email via email, and in fact I dropped it in person last Friday, because since January, when we would have submitted it, we have not even had an acknowledgement.
I'll make sure. So that last correspondence was sent last Friday?
No. We responded to the letter and would have sent it off in January.
In January, okay.
Early January, because you remember we had some serious lockdown issues, etc. You know, so we sent off the response in January. Okay.
Right.
We have not had the usual response and acknowledgement of it. And given the fact that there is now a lot of talk, and in fact the team from the Parliamentary Elections Office, you know, are on several programs. We heard them on GBN at the end of February. So we thought, you know, to ensure that this is received, it was dropped in person. So I know the office has now received it.
We have to take a commercial break, but let me ask you though. So the communique was sent. When was the last time you physically checked the website?
Well, I continue to have that problem, because since 2020, I have been trying to find my name on the list via the website from my computer, and not for hell it would come up. In fact, when I said so to them, they suggested to me that my computer had a problem. Well, I sent my computer and so on. And in fact, just last week, now I'm not saying my name is not there. I am only saying that, as I have done before, I expect to be able to access it from my computer. I have not had that problem. I don't know if other persons have that problem, but I have had that problem. But I don't know that other persons have it. Have you had it? Have you tried to access it from your computer?
Not in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
But I would be interested to find out what sort of technical problems one would have that would render them unable to access information that should be set in some way safe and secure, that the general public, when you need it, that we should be able to access it. Would probably need that. That would need that.
Well, I don't know. Maybe my computer is special, because you know every time I go on the MGov website as well, where that, you know, we saw that notice there. There is some security threat, but I decided, you know what, I'm going through. So I was able to access the, you know, that
We keep
that invitation.
We're keeping our eyes on the clock. 29 minutes until the hour of 10 o'clock.
And I would like to talk about the MPID before you open the lines.
Sure.
Right.
We take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we continue the conversation here with my guests, representatives of civil society organizations, Sandra Fergusson and Dave Nedd. We'll be right back.
Join GBN on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. for Interesting Grenadians, a program that showcases the lives of interesting and outstanding Grenadians at home and abroad. It's Interesting Grenadians every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. on GBN. Don't you miss it.
One day, I woke up and, they painted a set of pedestrian crossing all along the streets. Nobody told us how to use that thing properly.
I know how.
You're serious?
Every safe, good driver knows about these things. As a driver, you have to be very attentive. You're coming up close to a pedestrian cross, you start slowing down immediately, looking to see if there's any pedestrian on the side getting ready to cross. If there is, you stop on the line that is a certain distance before the crosswalk. Then you would see the pedestrian put their hands out, looking directly at you, indicating that they are going to cross. And only when you have come to a complete stop, that is when they will quickly and safely cross to the other side. And then you continue happily on your journey.
Stop, look, hand out, eye contact, wait for pedestrian to cross. Then you happily continue on your journey.
This message is brought to you by this group of insurance companies, the Traffic Advisory Body, and the Traffic Department.
GBN Television News at 7, a pulse on all things Grenadian. Look out for our new features through expanded synergies with our media partners in Barbados, St. Lucia, Jamaica, Trinidad, and beyond. Capturing the latest in news, sports, weather, and entertainment. Credible, informative. Thank you for making us number one. News at 7, live, Monday to Friday on GBN Television, Channel 7 and 11. K105.5 and 105.9, Hot 98.5 and 98.7, GBN Television Facebook page and YouTube channel, and www.gbn.gd. GBN, with you anywhere and everywhere.
Grenada's chief medical officer has ordered that all confirmed positive COVID-19 individuals, their contacts, and members of their household must remain in quarantine or isolation for 14 days. Anyone who fails to comply with this order will be in breach of the Public Health COVID-19 Regulations 2020 and is guilty of an offense. Upon summary conviction, that person will be liable to a penalty of up to $10,000. A message from the Ministry of Health.
Thank you. Welcome back to the program. 25 minutes on to the hour of 10 o'clock. My guest this morning, representatives of the grouping of civil society organizations, Sandra Fergusson and Mr. Dave Nedd. We are going to want to open the lines in just a bit. But Sandra, there's something you wanted us to talk about?
Yes. Because some time has elapsed, Joseph, since 2013. But you would remember that the then supervisor, well, in fact, she is really still, there is an acting one, but substantively the post is still Miss Benoit's, right? And she was dismissed, right? And she was dismissed because she challenged the directive that came from Parliament that she should be the database of the electoral office available, for the electoral to the initiative that was going on, which was under the Electronic Government for the Regional Integration Project, EGRIP, right? And one of the things that the EGRIP was putting in place was this thing called a multi-purpose ID, a multi-purpose identification system, or a national identification card, right? And among all things, it intended to marry all the registries, right? So whereas instead of having an NIS card and a driver's license and everything, and you would also be able to travel, right? So it was going to facilitate ease of travel during through the OECS. Now, we are not quite sure what is the status in Grenada, but we know in 2013 it was under implementation,
right.
Because in fact the Governor General had a meeting with her, and the Governor General told her that one has to. They tell me about this EGRIP project. It's an OECS project, and we have the money for it from World Bank, and if we don't do something soon, we're going to lose the money. So I am dismissing you with immediate effect. And there and then she appointed Aaron Francois, who subsequently also resigned in April 2014. Mm-hmm. Now, just in the news, in November 2021, it came out that there had been an order from the court to settle the matter out of court. I don't know if you remember that, because she also she asked for judicial, and secondly, the judicial review had to get the blessings of the court. We don't know, and that seems to be on a total standstill, right? And secondly, she had also requested damages for wrongful dismissal, right? Now, it says here, and in 2013, in February 2013, the OECS launched a multi-purpose ID system in Grenada. I suppose that was the start of the project, right? To put it in. Then, February 2014, the multi-purpose ID system is launched. Welcome the launch, so I don't know if it has been done twice. I don't quite understand this. So we need to know what is the status of that. And I just want to link it to what I know about Dominica. Because Dominica, in fact, developed the multi-purpose ID, and it is linked to its. So it is now the card as well for voter registration, right? And the Electoral Commission in Dominica has the responsibility for the issuance and administration of the National Identification Card. And that ID card is from birth to death. No, not everyone, of course, because it's until you reach to 18, right, then you are allowed to vote. I don't know who knows anything about how this is going in Grenada. What I will share with you as well is some observations that was made by the World Bank, that at the close of February 2014, when the first project closed, Grenada had issued 800 EID cards to public servants, and they were going to continue that, right? So the question we have to ask ourselves now: what is going on? What is the role of the Parliamentary Elections Office? And let us know, because remember, that is why Ms. Benoit was dismissed. Ms. Benoit was dismissed because she refused or challenged the directive for access to the electoral database. And what are the potential dangers, disadvantages, or concerns and risk, and what exactly is going on with that?
435-2041. That is the number on the inside. It is 20 minutes onto the hour. In case you're just joining us, my guests this morning, representatives of civil society organizations, Sandra Fergusson and Mr. Neil Dave Nedd. We have a caller this morning. Caller, you're alive. Good morning, caller. You're alive.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Cadore. Greetings and greetings to your guests, Sister Fergusson and Brother Nedd. Listen, I take very seriously this issue of the national identification versus the electoral card. I've lived in another jurisdiction where I recognize that it's separate. The National Civil Registry is responsible for the birth and death of all the people in the country. I don't want to go into it, but we have to put a system back into place where the national identification is fed into the electoral system. In other words, they ought to be separate. And I cannot understand why foreign entities, and I refer, whether it be Dominica or St. Lucia or St. Vincent, have to do with our national identification. But I want to raise this issue to the citizen Fergusson, because you people are identifying some serious irregularities, or have been, and up to now are, identifying serious irregularities with the electoral system in this area country. And we know what that can lead to. But there is something I would like you all to look at. According to the so-called constitution of this country, section 32, subsection 3, if you can check it out, the way the ballot is supposed to operate, supervise and operate. For people with visual impairment like me, it is crystal clear for what my machine read to me that the ballot should be conducted in such a way as to create the secrecy that no one should know who another person votes for. However, I've noted for 3 occasions back here, since I've been back here, the voters with visual impairment in this country are obligated to go into the booth with another person. Beats me to understand where the secrecy is there. Despite recommendations and simple demonstrations, cost not beyond 1 file folder that can facilitate the secrecy of the ballot for the person with disabilities. I would like you people to take this matter up so that at least the next occasion it be heard, and to promote this matter to the international agencies of this continued violation and scant regard for the people with disabilities with visual impairment in this here country, how the rights are being violated by the electoral authority. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Thank you very much. My dear sir, lady,
Mr. Nedd, would you like to take that question?
Those are very, very interesting comments. They are indeed troubling because there are almost, from my recollection, there's almost between 9 and 10,000 visually impaired adults. And that represents a significant portion of the electorate. If we're looking at 80,000+, you know, it's up there. It's almost 10% of the electorate. Now, that is concerning because the Constitution expressly, the Constitution expressly provides that there must be secrecy of your ballot. And if I may just refer to the sections 32, subsection 3 of the Constitution, and it says, in any election of members of the House of Representatives, the vote shall be given by ballot in such manner as not to disclose how any person votes. So that is simple. It's a constitutional provision that can be, that there is redress for in the courts. So if a person feels that their rights have been aggrieved, then they should have access to the courts, and there can be a determination, because it is the responsibility of the supervisor of the election. That is an instruction from the Constitution to the supervisor, that when he gives a ballot, the ballot must be given in a manner that no one should know how you vote.
Thank you, sir.
I would like to just respond to, and let's not forget the last elections, and some of the ballot paper that we got was not exactly secret. You could see through it. But I want to respond to the reference to Dominica. Now, this was an OECS project, so I am merely saying what happened in Dominica, what Dominica has done. They have indicated that it is administered, it's issued by the Electoral Commission, that however, it is the identity card, the national identity card, but it is the data, the civil registry is separate from the electoral registry, but it is one card they're using.
Right.
I have merely said this because if you ask us which institutions are giving those cards, we don't know.
Right.
We don't know.
We have a caller that's on the line. Good morning, caller. You're live.
Greetings. How are you, and everyone?
Wonderful, thank you. Go ahead,
all
please.
the best to the listeners. As usual, interesting program with particular issue with the colleagues there talking about the electoral machinery. And I want to say here that if I can raise about 4 or 5 points briefly, and most of these issues have been raised.
I do hope you do remember you promised me brief, sir.
Yes, I will try. So let me just go off the back to say that those issues are not being ventilated and raised by the political parties, in particular the so-called opposition. And this should be of concern. In fact, most dialogue and conversation taking place concerning the electoral machinery is confined with the major political parties, not even referencing the minor ones. Point 2, this should be significant, and hence the role of civil society. I'm happy when Sister Sandra made a point that the composition of civil society is for concerned citizens, so individuals can come on board. And so I'm giving a special invitation, especially for the young people, to be in contact with us, with civil society, because we need to pass on the baton. So they need to come to help rescue the country and don't depend on the politicians. Point 3, I want to say here that even existing right now is a non-closure to missing computers. It's going for a decade now. I'm not been hearing political parties talking about that. The Parliamentary Election Office attempt to give some reason for it, saying the issue is closed. But personally, and I am J.K. Roberts, who have been laboring on these issues, constitution, pension, election, I am saying that the authorities have a right to have some forensic investigation. This is a sovereign issue to have real official closure on that. And for me, we need to look at that very importantly. And I will force to end here, Brother Host Joe, and there's much I can say. We have election cycle come, election cycle go. And we have been, I don't know if we have been paying them, but we have been inviting foreign observer team to come here, and they have been given a host of valuable recommendations for improvement. And up to this time, we have not seen any genuine effort or genuine implication for electoral reform to enhance our situation. And we're just going through the motion, and I have written many times, and I'm warning again, that I don't want what happened in Dominica and other places on the verge of an election or June election process or at an election. We have political parties, even as the official NDC, come and make noise. We have been wasting time. Time for us sovereign people, young people, forget the political color and come to Rescue Your Grenada. We can see what is happening. And let us pray, as I all time say, for the intervention and guidance of Jesus Christ. Thank you very much.
All the best to you. Sandra, Dave?
Well, no, you go ahead.
Dave, go ahead.
Okay, those comments were very, very important comments. I think that they speak to the part of the concerns that we are, in fact, articulating here now. And, you know, it's interesting. The Constitution protects the privacy of your phone. And Joey just related that, and we read from the section after those concerns were raised. But the Constitution also protects the privacy of the information that you give to register. That is a very important component of this. For the registration process, you must give your date of birth, you must give your fingerprint, you must give your where you live. That is information that is private and confidential. And it is necessary as a citizen for you to know that other entities outside of the process that it was intended for cannot access that information, right? Because, for instance, your fingerprint, somebody cannot just access your fingerprint. If an entity wants your fingerprint, because of whatever the reason, they have to get a court order before they can get your fingerprint. But if it is that others have access to the information that is stored in the database of the electoral office, then it is of concern for every single adult over 18 years of age. Because it means that your information is not secure.
I know Sandra wanted to comment, but we do have a caller. Let's see if we can entertain this caller. Good morning, caller. You're live.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Yes. The letter which was responded to by the electoral office, I was thinking, I wonder if the person who responded to the letter consulted with the Attorney General for legality on what he was doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, caller. Sandra, Dave, your thoughts, comments on this?
Well, obviously we can answer that, right? So I just would like to go back again to the Dominica reference, right? As I said, this project is an OECS project. Those were the concerns, right? And I am just telling you based on the information that I've been able to garner, because as well, when I click on the link as it relates to Grenada, you know, and the EGRIC project, I come up with a 404 error, okay? So it's also interesting because, as I said, the Electoral Commission is responsible. The enrollment into the MPID system and the issuance of ID cards, right? This card will be used in elections. When the Commission is satisfied that all individuals who are entitled to vote have been given a reasonable opportunity to enroll and obtain a card, and that a significant number of such individuals have been issued a card, the presentation of the card at polling stations will be made mandatory for voting at elections in the Commonwealth of Dominica, right? So I am just sharing with you what has happened in one of the islands, right? And it was done in the 4 OECS islands. This is where it's at in Dominica. And it rings a bell because a number of people, and let me make it clear, we don't know what's going on here. We want to know, okay? People have been raising concerns. Why is it am I required to present all of these documents if all you're doing is replacing my card? Because actually it's like registering again, right? So why do you need all of this information to simply replace the card? When I bring the one I have, you obviously could see that I have a card.
Right.
But it is interesting because as part of enrolling in the MPID, right, the national ID card, you need to bring your documents, right? You need to bring one or two of those documents. So
is it that registration into that system that's been done covertly?
Well, so we need to ask that. We need to ask if this is in fact what is happening. So that is the reason why I keep referring to Dominica, saying, well, listen, this has happened in Dominica under the eGRIP system. This is what happened.
Right.
In Grenada, we are not quite certain what has happened with the MPID system. But certainly, Grenada got money. Ms. Benoit was fired because she challenged the access to the electoral database by the civil registry, by those who are setting up the system. You understand? And since then, we don't know what's going on.
So she was fired because she challenged the system. She was subsequently
and she asked for a judicial review, right. Okay? And that's on hold.
So the question is, if in fact the process is on hold, what has happened to the funding? If in fact the process was rolled out,
well, it would seem that the process was rolled out.
Let me ask, because we literally
is being rolled out.
Dave, we all the time, and I know we have not even really scratched the surface. I want to ask a question: is our democracy being hijacked? Dave, is our democracy under attack?
I would answer that this way. There are protections to prevent our democracy from being hijacked, and we are looking at those protections being eroded. They are not applied. So you can answer the question. You know, it's evident that the obvious protections that are there to ensure that our process or democracy, the whole concept that one man, one vote, it's not being applied. The constitutional, we are going outside of the constitutional and in some cases the provisions of the Representation of the People's Act.
Well, Dave, I want to stick a pin here. I would be very careful about saying we're going outside one man, one vote. But we are concerned that what is happening is outside of the Representation of the People's Act, right? For example, this invitation to register online, okay? The fact that you have a CBI, Citizenship by Investment Service Provider, okay? Inviting these citizens to be registered, okay? And even more concerning is that when you, as a group, a concerned citizen, writes to the office with the constitutional authority, you are told that these are allegations and nothing is done about it.
What would the response be for my final question to you? Because there are many that would probably ask, well, we're into a technological era. Why not embrace technology?
It has to be done within the law, right? Where is the amendments to the law? And why do you shut me down instead of using your authority to say, but this is not correct? We have to do so. Listen, I listened to your program, I think it was you, on the 28th. Mm-hmm. And I listened to one that was in January on the narrative. The supervisor of elections indicated that you must present yourself in person. It might look archaic, but that is how we are doing it.
Right.
Right? And then when you have the whole issue of residence requirements and you have a whole new set of citizens who can't speak your language, all they do is flash money and get a passport. And now they could also interfere. Well, not interfere, but certainly influence the outcome of your elections because they could vote. I think we're in serious problems.
Dave, your final 2 pence?
I want to advocate that as citizens, we pay attention to this process. It will impact on us in the near future, in the present, and it is going to impact on future generations. I am asking those young people who are now turning 18 and who are going to be partaking in the process of registration, that they should question it. Because there are a number of questions that are, that can be asked and requires some sort of answers too. And, Joe, again, I would want to thank you for the opportunity that you've given us to relay these messages. And it is just our hope that the general public is going to take these concerns and ask the relevant questions and demand answers.
Are there questions to be asked? Questions being asked, that is. Answers that's needed. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Dave, Nedd. To all, we say thanks to all our listeners and our viewers, those in radio, those in television, those who joined in via our social media platforms. Certainly, as my board of a guest, we've intimated, this is about us. This is not about those on the outside. Our democracy, voting is our civic rights and responsibility, and certainly provisions as made and enshrined in the Constitution, and as such as all Grenadians, we should try our best to ensure that those provisions, they are being upheld and we get our protection under that very said Constitution. With it Friday, well, this is the last to the point segment session for the week. Indeed, it was always a pleasure being here with you. I continue with you, though, and I'll rejoin you on television at around 11 o'clock when I'll be linking up with the Tivoli Drummers, a representative, that is, Livingston Nelson and the gang. I understand those guys are going to be drumming up some real sessions this weekend. We'll tell you about that when I rejoin you on television at 11 o'clock. Until then, I always encourage you to live life and love life, Grenada. Treat each day as though it's your last day. And you live, you've done your best, you recognize you're still here. What do? I say we continue living all over again. Until then, so long, everybody. JC loves you. Have a great one.